The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead as I stood barefoot on the cold tile, waiting for the kettle to boil. It was 11:18 p.m. The baby monitor sat on the counter, silent and glowing, the tiny green bar steady. No crying, no movement, just quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't happen in houses with toddlers unless something has gone terribly right or terribly wrong. I leaned against the counter, one arm wrapped across my chest, the other cradling my phone. It was muscle memory now. Scrolling, refreshing, pretending I didn't know what I was looking for. But I knew. I always knew. There it was. Jason. Still awake? Simple. Casual. Predictable. I stared at it. My thumb hovered above the keyboard. I didn't reply. Not yet. I let the message sit there, heavy and familiar, while the kettle clicked just short of boiling. It always stopped just before the whistle, a quirk my husband kept meaning to fix, but never did. He was asleep upstairs, of course. Lights off, door cracked, sound machine humming waves into our son's room. I could picture it clearly. The way our boy slept on his stomach with his knees pulled under him, the way my husband's arm would stretch across my pillow even when I wasn't there. I loved them. I want to say that first. I loved them, but something in me had dried up. Not overnight. Not from trauma or betrayal. It was slower, like a leak in the foundation. A loss of color over time. 1,000 small surrenders until I couldn't remember the last thing I'd chosen for myself. The kettle clicked off. I didn't move. Instead, I typed, me. Barely. Long day. His reply came quickly. He was always fast at night. Jason, you always say that, but you never talk about it. I hesitated. Then, me. Nothing big, just routines. Same hours, same fights, same cereal. Jason. Same man? I stared at the words. Not because they were unexpected. He always danced near that line. But because I felt myself bracing for the question I wasn't brave enough to ask. Jason. Do you still want it? The life, the rhythm, the man who falls asleep before you finish brushing your teeth. I didn't answer. I closed the app, locked the phone, walked to the sink and poured the water out, untouched. The steam curled against the air and vanished, just like that. When I climbed the stairs, everything in me felt twice as heavy. Our bedroom was dim. My husband's back was turned. I slid into bed slowly, careful not to wake him. His arm reached in his sleep, resting over my waist. Warm, familiar. And I lay there, staring at the ceiling, heart still tapping out a rhythm for a different life. The next day began as they all did. Cereal, cartoons, emails, dishes. My son wanted the yellow spoon instead of the green, and when I gave him the wrong one by accident, he howled like I'd ruined Christmas. I smiled through it. That's what mothers do. My husband was working from home that week. He kissed my forehead, told me I looked tired, asked if I'd had weird dreams. I said I didn't remember. He made coffee. I didn't drink it. I spent the morning folding laundry that wasn't mine. Little onesies, socks too small for a grown man to hold without wondering how they ever got that tiny. It's amazing how much of motherhood is invisible. How much of womanhood, for that matter. At noon, I checked my phone. Nothing. And that made me angry. It wasn't about Jason. Not really. It was about being seen, about being asked, about someone saying, I know you're slipping and I don't care. Come anyway. I was still angry when the message finally came. Jason, if I showed up tonight, would you open the door? I didn't answer right away. I set the phone down and watched my son push wooden blocks into a lopsided tower. He smiled at me with peanut butter on his chin, and something in my chest broke a little. That night, I made dinner like always, bathed our son, read the same book 3 times, tucked him in, kissed his forehead, whispered that I loved him more than the moon. I climbed into bed beside my husband. He was already half asleep. "Everything okay?" he mumbled. "Yeah," I said. "Just couldn't sleep." I picked up my phone, typed, "Me." The front door's unlocked. The stairs creaked beneath my feet like they always did. Third step from the top, just slightly warped. A sound that used to mean nothing and now made my chest tighten. I moved slowly, not because I was afraid of being heard, but because I had no idea what I would do if I was. My husband's breathing was steady in the bedroom behind me. That low, rhythmic inhale-exhale of someone deep inside a dream. I knew that sound. I'd slept to it for years. It used to comfort me. I passed the hallway. Our son's door was cracked just enough to let the warm amber glow of his nightlight spill out. I stopped there for a moment. Not long. Just enough to remind myself that this was real. That my life was here, inside this house. Then I moved on. The living room was colder than I expected. The heater hadn't kicked in yet. The hum of the fridge was the only noise, broken only by the occasional creak of old pipes. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't check my reflection. I didn't even check the time. I just unlocked the door and waited. Jason didn't knock. He slipped in like he'd done it 100 times. Hoodie pulled up, shoes off in one fluid motion. He didn't smile, didn't greet me. He just looked at me like I was something he'd earned. I closed the door behind him. Everything was quiet. And then he stepped closer. There was no foreplay, no games, no whispered nothings. This wasn't about connection. This wasn't romance. This was a ritual. A short circuit to whatever part of me still believed I was only what my family needed. He pressed me back against the wall. Not hard. Just enough to remind me I was solid, that I had shape, that I still existed outside of soft voices and warm milk and toy bins. I felt his hands on my hips. I felt his breath on my collarbone. I heard nothing but the distant hum of the baby monitor and my own heartbeat, louder than I wanted it to be. For a moment, I wondered if my husband was awake, if he could feel the absence in the bed beside him, if he would reach for me and find nothing but cold air. And I wondered if he did. Would he wait? Would he get up? Or would he convince himself I'd just gone to the kitchen? Because that's how far gone I was. I was already building the lie inside the lie. Jason didn't take his time. Neither did I. It wasn't even about the act itself. It was about the silence, the high-pitched danger that pulsed just beneath it, the tension of doing something that would crack the world in half if it made a sound. He kissed me once. Not tender, not cruel, just enough to remind me that I was choosing this, that I could still choose. When it was over, I didn't ask him to stay. He didn't ask to. He walked to the door, zipped up his jacket, and said, "Same time tomorrow?" And I said nothing. I just opened the door again. He disappeared into the night like smoke. I locked it. Stood in the dark, barefoot, the floor cold beneath me. I looked down the hallway. My son was still asleep. My husband was still asleep. The house was untouched, and yet I had never felt so contaminated. The next day, I barely thought about it. I made breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon for my son, 2 slices of toast for my husband. I drank tea instead of coffee because I was still jittery. though not in the way caffeine would cause. I folded laundry, answered work emails, asked the pediatrician about a rash on my son's back. I played my role, not like I was hiding, like I belonged in it. Because the truth is, I did. I was still the same woman who wiped little hands and cut strawberries into tiny pieces, who checked the baby monitor 3 times before falling asleep, who remembered every refill, every appointment, every toy my son left in the car. I was that woman. I am that woman. But I was something else now, too. Something I couldn't put into a word. I didn't text Jason that day. He didn't text me either. But around 9:30, I started preparing anyway. I bathed, shaved, pulled on a soft old t-shirt I knew I'd take off again. I didn't look in the mirror for long. Just long enough to make sure I didn't look like someone unraveling. By 10:45, I'd laid down beside my husband, still damp-haired and quiet. He reached for me, kissed my forehead, whispered, "You smell like eucalyptus." I said, "New soap." He said, "I like it." And I smiled, not because he did, but because I knew Jason would say nothing about it at all. At 11:22, I slipped out of bed again. Same steps, same door, same message. Jason. Here. This time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even check the peephole. I just opened the door and let him in. It was easier, smoother, like we'd already done this a dozen times, like we were just repeating what we both already understood. No words. We didn't need them. I didn't realize I was shaking until I felt his hand press into my lower back, steadying me. Not kindly, not cruelly, just with purpose. The way someone holds a cord before cutting it clean. There was nothing romantic. No candles. No music. The TV remote blinked on the armrest, forgotten from earlier. We didn't turn on a light. And in that darkness, I gave him pieces of myself that no longer felt precious. Pieces I used to protect. Now, they just felt like escape routes. Afterward, we sat on the floor, not touching, not speaking. He pulled out a cigarette, unlit, rolled it between his fingers. "I get it, you know," he said finally. "The need to feel like something's yours." I didn't respond, because if I did, I might say too much. Or not enough. When he left, he didn't look back. And when I went upstairs again, I noticed my husband had rolled onto my side of the bed. Like he'd reached for me in his sleep, expecting warmth and finding nothing. I curled beside him, slowly, gently. He shifted, murmured, "There you are." And I said nothing, because I wasn't. By the 4th time, I had stopped pretending it was a one-time thing. There was no more guilt, only systems. I knew when to leave the bedroom, how to soften the sound of the floorboards, where to keep my phone so it wouldn't vibrate too loudly, which door hinge creaked and how far to turn the knob before it caught. I knew the rhythm of Jason's knock. 1 pause, then 2 quiet taps, always spaced 5 seconds apart. It was a dance now. One I rehearsed without music, one that made more sense than anything else in my day. And the worst part? I didn't feel like I was lying. Not really. I still held my husband's hand when he fell asleep on the couch during movies. I still brushed my son's hair gently before preschool and hummed the same lullaby he asked for every night. I still laughed at my sister's bad jokes on FaceTime and sent heart emojis in the family group chat. But a whole other version of me moved in the silence. A woman with no titles, no roles, just nerve endings and locked doors. And for a while, it worked. Until the morning he asked the question. We were in the kitchen, sunlight spilling through the window, dust floating like tiny confessions in the air. Our son was eating toast with banana slices. I was rinsing a cup, half listening to some podcast playing in the background. And my husband said, "Hey, did you go outside last night?" The question was too simple, too gentle. I turned, blinked. "What?" He smiled faintly. "The door was unlocked this morning. Just wondered if maybe you went out for something. Tea or I don't know." He wasn't accusing. He was curious. That made it worse. Because I could have said yes. I could have invented something soft, something normal. I could have said I needed air, or went to get something from the car, or heard a noise. But instead, I just froze. And in that half second, he tilted his head, just slightly. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, with instinct. I smiled. I must have forgotten to lock it after putting out the trash. He nodded. Slowly. Then looked down at his coffee like he was trying to convince himself it was that simple. But I saw it. The shift. The thread beginning to fray. He said nothing else. Just kissed the top of my head before leaving for work. But I felt watched after that. Not in the way he stared. In the way he didn't. He stopped asking if I slept okay. Stopped reaching for my hand while driving. Stopped humming while he folded laundry. Something he'd done for years without realizing. It was like he had put a question between us and couldn't decide if he wanted the answer. And still, I met Jason that night. Still, I let him in. Only this time, I double-checked the lock before I went back to bed. Only this time, I didn't fall asleep right away. Because for the first time in weeks, I could hear the silence of our bedroom breathing differently. And I wasn't sure whose heart I was hearing. Mine. Or his. It was the porch camera. The one we installed the year we moved in after a neighbor had their Amazon packages stolen twice in 1 month. We never used it. Never opened the app. I had honestly forgotten it existed. But apparently my husband hadn't. He was quiet all day. Not distant, not cold. Just still. Like a lake with something dangerous beneath the surface. I told myself it was work. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things that day. Then came the night. The house was quiet. Our son asleep. Dishes done. Lights low. He called my name once. Not loudly. I walked into the living room and saw him sitting on the edge of the couch, his phone in his hand, his eyes nowhere. He didn't look at me. He just tapped the screen once, turned it toward me, and hit play. There I was, on the screen, blurry in night vision green, opening the door, letting Jason in. No sound. Just a timestamp. 11:47 p.m. Jason's figure slipping past me like he belonged. My hand closing the door. My bare feet turning away. The clip ended. He set the phone down slowly like it was made of glass. Still, he didn't look at me. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. There were no words for this. Nothing I could say would soften the image of me doing exactly what I had done. Nothing would unsee it. Finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, flat. "How many times?" I said nothing. He turned his head, eyes meeting mine for the first time that night. "Just once," he said, as if offering me an escape. I shook my head. "Barely." He closed his eyes. That was worse than if he'd screamed. Because screaming is a connection. This was the absence of it. "I didn't check the camera," he said. "For months. I don't know what made me look last night. I had a feeling, a weird one." I swallowed. He stood, not suddenly, not aggressively, just with finality. I'm not asking for an explanation. I don't want details. I don't want names. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. I just want you to know, he continued, that I see you now. He paused. Let that sit. For a long time, I was looking at a version of you that wasn't real, that smiled through dinner, that sang to our son, that told me she couldn't sleep because her mind was racing. He stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to make sure I heard him. You weren't lying to me, were you? You were just gone. I felt the tears before I could stop them, but he didn't reach for me. He didn't soften. He just walked past me toward the hallway, then stopped. I'm going to stay tonight, he said, because our son will wake up early and he deserves normal. He glanced over his shoulder, but I won't be here tomorrow night. And then he walked away. He didn't slam the door. He didn't pack a suitcase with dramatic zippers or shout for justice or beg for answers. He folded his clothes, 2 neat piles, took only what he needed, his laptop, his razor, 1 photo from the shelf, the one of him holding our son at the beach, their cheeks pressed together, squinting into the sun. I watched from the hallway. He didn't tell me where he was going, didn't ask me to explain, didn't say the words I expected: betrayal, disgust, rage. He just moved slowly, deliberately, like someone trying to leave behind the smallest possible shadow. Our son was napping. The house was quiet. And in that stillness, I finally realized what real consequence feels like. It isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It just removes itself from the room. When he zipped his bag, he looked at me for the first time since the night before. Not with hatred, not even with sadness. Just nothing. Like I was a stranger in the home we built, like he had finally accepted the part of me I had hidden was not just a phase, but a fracture. He walked to the door, paused. I want him to stay here, he said. I'm not taking him. He needs stability. And you'll keep things steady for him. You always were good at that. I opened my mouth. He held up a hand. But I'll be around. I'll never stop being his father. I nodded, voice caught somewhere deep in my chest. And as for us? He trailed off, eyes scanning the room, the couch, the toys, the blanket he always threw over his legs during movies. There is no us anymore, not because of what you did, but because of what I finally understood. What? I asked, barely breathing. He looked me dead in the eyes. You were never really here. And then he stepped outside, pulling the door gently behind him. No slam, just silence. And that was the sound that undid me. I didn't chase him. I didn't call Jason. I didn't confess to anyone. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by my life, and listened to the hum of appliances and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel desired. I didn't even feel guilty. I just felt gone. Because I hadn't lost him the night he saw the video. I lost him long before that. In the quiet. In the routine. In the nights I slipped away thinking I could always return and find him waiting. But some people don't slam the door when they leave. They just stop opening it. And now I know he was the only one who really saw me, even when I didn't deserve it. And now I live in a house that still echoes with his kindness, even in his absence. A house where every creak, every sigh, every late night makes me wonder what might have happened if I'd locked the door that first time. And stayed.